Next thing I wanted to talk about. So I did the episode on Operation Plate. Now, it's funny because I try to keep my shows relatively short, under 30 minutes tops. That Operation Plate, that segment alone was 28 minutes, and it was funny because I recorded it and then I'm editing it, and usually I'll record it and then every episode gets about 20 minutes edited out of it. That segment was so lean. I left the bare bones of that story in to the episode. I recommend you guys following the links and reading more because there are tons of firsthand. I had to take out a couple of the villagers' firsthand encounters of the Chupa Chupas because I was just simply running out of time. There were a lot of people had their own encounters with these vehicles or creatures or whatever they were. And I was like, I'd love to include all these little tidbits, but I needed to keep it lean. Having it clock in, I think the episode was around 35 minutes, was literally as short as I could get it with having every plot point. Everything that was in there almost had to be in there. But I recommend, out of all the episodes I've done, that's the one that you click on those links, you're going to read some really cool firsthand UFO encounters. So I encourage you to go back to that and check those links out. But when I was researching that, I came across an article. It was deaths attributed to UFOs, or, people who had died during the investigation of UFOs, things like that, because a couple people had died by the Chupa Chupas. And I came across a couple stories, 2 to be exact, of human mutilation. Now, not human mutilation like some gross old serial killer or some like gangbangers, but people who they suspected were human forms of cattle mutilation. Now, if you don't know what cattle mutilation is, it is the theory that cows are abducted by aliens and they do these surgical procedures to them. Generally, their eyes are removed, their anus is removed, all the blood is drained from the body. They have like these burn marks in their skin. They have these holes bore into them. And the reason why we know about it is that we find cows in the middle of nowhere and they're missing their eyes and they're missing their anus, they're missing their genitals, and they don't have any blood. And farmers have been dealing with this problem for a long time. I mean, and recorded, like in the past, mostly like say 40, 50, 60 years, there's been more documentation of these cattle mutilations. And the theories started off where it's like, oh, it's a satanic cult, or it's UFOs, or it's some sicko out there traveling all of the United States doing these things to cows. But farmers do find these cows. They can't find them, and then when they do find them, they're missing their eyes and other soft tissue parts of their body. And the theory with UFOologists is that they're being abducted, tested on, and then being dropped back off. Now, the question of whether or not humans have been subjected to this, some people believe, that we do have proof of it because we have 2 stories of bodies that have been found in similar states. So there was an interesting story that came out of New Mexico in 1956. It's known as the Jonathan Lovette incident. So Jonathan Lovette and William Cunningham were friends and they were in the military together. And they said, William Cunningham, so spoiler alert, you think you know what happens to Jonathan. William Cunningham says that him and Jonathan were out and about, and they were looking for like missile debris. That there was a missile test or something that had happened, and they had to go find pieces of it that fell off for their job, I'm assuming. I don't assuming they're just collectors. Cunningham comes back to the base alone, and he says something took Jonathan. They went to go look at these sand dunes to go find this debris. And now I've kind of figured out probably what happened here, but they go to the sand dunes to look for this debris. And all of a sudden, Jonathan Lovette disappeared. He couldn't find, he was gone in a heartbeat. And then Cunningham heard these screams. He ran over and he saw Lovette there. And there was a silver disc hovering over Jonathan Lovette. And these, he described them as snake-like creatures, but basically these tendrils came out of the vehicle, wrapped around Jonathan Lovette, and sucked him into the sucked him into the spaceship, or whatever it was, the silver disc, and then it flew away. People were thinking that Cunningham must have done something to him, and they buried the body or something like that, but what happened was, eventually, Jonathan Lovette's body was discovered, and he had these wounds, such as removal of the eyes, ears, and tongue, and according to this article on UFOinside.com, every drop of blood had also been removed from the carcass. So that's a little spooky. You're out with your buddy, palling around the dunes, and the little spaceship zooms him up, and then it flies away with him, and then you find his body, and he has the wounds that we attribute with cattle mutilations. The next story we have on that actually has less information, but more documentation, because unfortunately we have photos of this poor fellow. We don't know who he was, and took place in Brazil, which is kind of weird, because we were just there with our Operation Plate episode. This took place at the Guanaparinga Reservoir. It's south of Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo, is that how you say it? But anyways, so they found this body, and the pictures are quite grisly. So don't be clicking on the links if you don't want to see a picture of a screaming dead man. Because this guy, he has his lips completely eaten away. His anus is completely gone. He has damage to the genitals. His organs are also messed up, gone. Here, let me read. So this is from the autopsy report. I'm going to read this specifically because this is important. From the autopsy report, we observed the removal of the right and left orbital areas, that's your eyeballs, emptying of the mouth cavity, pharynx, neck, right and left armpit area, abdomen, pelvic cavity, right and left groin area. The axillary regions. Sorry, the axillary regions on both. The axillary regions on both sides showed soft spots where organs had been removed. Incisions were made on the face, internal thorax, abdomen, legs, arms, and chest. Shoulders and arms have perforations of 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter where tissue and muscles were extracted. The edges of the perforations were uniform, and so were their size. The chest had shrunk due to the removal of internal organs. Cause of death: acute hemorrhage in multiple traumatisms. I think that's probably like multiple wounds, I don't know. There is a component of causa mortis by vagus stimulation, implying, don't worry, I'm almost done reading here, implying cardiorespiratory arrest caused by extreme pain. So basically he had a heart attack because he was in so much pain. The victim showed injuries of vital reaction characteristics, as in there is the component torture. The suggested modus operandi is incisions in soft parts and natural orifices using sucking devices. Now, because he died of a heart attack caused by pain, that's, at least they have a cause of death for him, and they have these quite gruesome photos if you want to see pictures of people with holes in their body. And I read on other websites too that his body was also completely drained of blood. So, here's the thing. So cattle mutilations, for the most part, have been debunked. Yes, that is real. The cows are being found with their soft organs gone, and they're missing some of their blood. And that's why hyperbole is very important with conspiracy theory. They're missing blood, but they're not completely drained. There's not a single drop of blood in them. So in 1979, there was Sheriff Herb Marshall. Herb or Herb, I think it doesn't matter. I've always said Herb. Wait, no, do I say it? I guess I say Herb if it's a person. Anyways, he's in Arkansas, and he goes, you know what? I'm having all these reports of cattle mutilations, and the farmers and ranchers are telling me that they think UFOs are taking them or satanic cult or whatever, but I think it's something more natural. So he took a cow carcass, and he threw it, a freshly killed cow, and he threw it out, and they watched it for 48 hours straight. No one showed up to drain anything from it, and they blowflies. It was basically maggots turning into flies, and predators, which will go for the soft tissue. They'll burrow holes in you, and they'll eat out your butthole, and they'll eat out your eyes and your lips, because that's all the easiest things to eat. Path of least resistance. And then after that, another research group, I believe it was in Canada, did a similar experiment, and they said, everything you can attribute to, let me back up. Most of the things you can attribute to cattle mutilation happen just naturally in the world. And you go, well, Jason, ranchers and farmers, they see dead cows all the time. Don't you think they would know this was natural? And they do see dead cows all the time, but they don't find the carcass. They see a dead cow, and they get to it before all the scavengers. It's dying on their farm, as opposed to a cow getting away from the farm, dying, and then 4 days later they find it. So the two humans who died, it's possible that one, the guy from Brazil, was tortured to death, and just the rest of the damage was done by predators. I think the guy in Brazil was probably killed very horribly. Maybe they were sucking his organs out while he was still alive. But again, the most logical answer was he was murdered by other humans, and we just found his body later. The guy in New Mexico, I don't want to cast aspersions or anything, But it's most likely, again, the most likely answer is he was killed by his friend. I do think it's weird that if I murdered a guy in the middle of nowhere, my go-to story would not be a UFO kidnapped him unless I figured the body would never be discovered. So if I murdered somebody in the middle of nowhere, I would not then go to the cops and say, oh my God, dude, my friend, something terrible happened to him. They're like, what happened? And I said, a UFO abducted him. Like, that wouldn't be my go-to thing. So if he did murder him, the story may have evolved over time, because I'm seeing that a lot doing this podcast. I'm seeing a lot. Now, again, let me go to that real quick. Originally, I'm sure the original story for both of these bodies were like, there was no blood at the crime scene. Like, we didn't find a lot of blood. And now it's become, there's no blood at all in the body. It's been completely drained. And I know that's 100% false for this Brazil one, because in the excerpts of the autopsy report that I just read to you, there is no mention of the body having no blood in it, like zero blood whatsoever. If it said that in the autopsy report, this website would have definitely highlighted that part, because that helps their theory. This website is one of the sites that talks about the body's drained of blood, especially when it talks about Jonathan Lovette. So if the body actually had no blood, if the coroner could say this body has not a single drop of blood in it, I think the body probably didn't have a lot of blood in it. And then over time, the story has morphed to saying it had no blood. None at all. It's just completely dry. There's biological actions that take place with blood and everything like that. That's why there's not blood everywhere from every time someone spilled blood, because little things are eating it. But anyways, all of these stories can be logically explained. The cows being found with their eyes being bore out and their buttholes gone and stuff like that, and these two gentlemen who have similar wounds. My thing with the whole cattle mutilation thing, the idea of it is creepy to begin with, that there's vehicles out there beyond our understanding that are abducting cows and possibly humans and experimenting on them and just dropping off in the middle of nowhere for us to find it. It's creepy. You find like this carcass. You don't know how it got there or why it suffered the wounds. Some people say that some of the cows have looked like they broke their necks due to drops from heights. And how else would a cow fall unless it was beamed up and then dropped? My pushback to the whole alien side of the cattle mutilation thing is that, so what we have to accept is a race of people, a race of beings, have built ships that are beyond our understanding of technology. And they also have the ability to beam things up or have tendrils that can come down and grab you and pull you up into their ship. And then they just throw your body out when they're done with it. They don't have an incinerator. We have incinerators. If somebody does something they don't want anyone to know about, just throw it in a fireplace at the very least, or you take them to a crematory. But somehow these aliens have all this advanced technology, and they go, man, we're doing these experiments, and we hope nobody finds out because our experimentation isn't done yet. We need to have all these cow anuses to be able to take over the planet, and yet they just throw the cows outside. Why don't they fly over the ocean and drop them into the ocean? Make it more difficult for us to suss out what their plan is. So, the story of the aliens, it automatically has that weak point. And you could say, well, the aliens want us to know. No, they don't. No, they don't. Ever. Never, ever. There would be no reason for them to want to leave evidence if the point of it was to do some sort of experiment on it. They would just dump them off. When we kidnap monkeys and experiment on them to do makeup, we don't then take the monkey bodies and throw them back in the jungle to let the other monkeys know that we're doing it, or to sow fear in the monkey population. No, we dispose of the bodies in a laboratory or in a crematory. I think, the guy, again, the military guy, I don't want to disparage him at all, but I think him and his buddy were probably out doing something that was frowned upon in the 1950s, and something happened, and the best story he could come up with is a giant snake slithered out and got his buddy, which you can read in the Freudian implications of that if you'd like. I think that's far more likely than a group of beings far more advanced than us took a dude, drilled out his butthole, and threw him on the ground. But I don't think that... for one, the whole story may be made up. It may just be part of UFOlogy lore. But it's also very likely that he did something to his friend and made the story up. And with the New Mexico thing, my question would be, why didn't the UFO take the witness as well? A man did die. We're assuming the whole story could be completely made up, because another thing I've learned during this podcast is sometimes you see the same story repeated over and over again, and then it turns out it's just completely not true. But let's assume the story is true. Why didn't the UFO take Cunningham too? Why did it let a witness go? And again, I say, why did the UFO then dump the body later? Why didn't it just incinerate it and the guy goes missing? And that way the alien, whoever was piloting the ship, would be like, ha ha ha, pulled one over on those good old Yankees flying away. But instead it drops the body, the guy got the murder charges, he didn't get charged with murder and stuff like that. That entire story just kind of smells in general. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.